Well, welcome to the session. Let's get started. Actually, I wanted to start with a question. How many of you feel intimidated with the aggregation framework? OK. Looks like some of you do, at least. And we do too, by the way. Can anybody tell me on this screen which ones are not valid aggregation keywords? Stages, operators, expressions, anything? It's not easy, right? Well, there's 31 stages, 150, 200 operators. And so it's pretty normal to feel intimidated. Thank you for coming today. So we are here to see how we are extending Compass to give you Query API superpowers, so you can feel more confident when you work with queries and with aggregations. My name is Massimiliano Marcon. I'm a product manager at MongoDB, a lead product manager. I work on developer experience and developer tools, where I spend my days thinking about how we can make you all feel less intimidated and more productive with our database and our Query API. Thankfully, I'm not alone here today. Here with me is my esteemed colleague, Claudia, who will now walk you through how we're building a better aggregation experience inside Compass.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia De Angis. I'm the product designer for the developer experience group at MongoDB. And my background is not very technical, I have to admit that. So I promise you that if I can build an aggregation, you can do it as well. So let's have a look at the agenda for today. We look forward to having you for the next, I think, 3 hours or so. We start with a bit of history, and then we'll show you something new in Compass and how we are thinking about improving the experience. Then Max will show you a demo, and then I will give you a sneak peek about the future of Aggregation Builder. And then we will have time at the end for questions. So please hold them till the end. Maybe something that I wanted to mention is about lunch. So we will have lunch at around like 12:30. We can all grab something. We can chat. We can connect. And then we can come back and have the workshop together. I think during the workshop, we will be able to build a new application. And we can be here around to help you with any questions or feedback. OK, so now that I start and share the agenda with you, let's move to the history. So where did we start? How was the journey from there till now? Let me walk you through some key facts here. So MongoDB, in 2012, introduced the aggregation framework. And this would allow to write custom operations without writing custom JavaScript. But over time, we realized that the aggregation framework became way more rich, more complex, with many new stages and operators to learn and to discover. But that also means that it can become very complex as well for all of you to use it. And that's why in 2018, we first introduced Compass, in Compass the aggregation builder, as a way to prototype and troubleshoot aggregations. And I think the first experience where you could build your aggregation stage by stage with real-time feedback made, I think, all of you quite happy. So all of a sudden, it was much more approachable. But then we started to connect with you all and learning and getting feedback. And what we learned was that you needed something more, something different, and we needed to improve the experience. And that's why I'm happy to say that today we are finally completing the workflow for the aggregations. So now, after you created your aggregation, you can run it against the whole collection, and then you can export the results. So I think this one is a nice and finally completing workflow for you. So the team worked on some new exciting projects. And so I wanted to take some time today to walk you through that. These new features are directly coming from you. We usually have interviews and chat with you all to try to learn what you need, what are your use cases, how we can get better. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to share some quotes that we collected over time. And now we use those quotes to make Compass a better tool. So this first quote is about saving queries. Can we save queries? It would be super useful. When I first heard about it, I was quite puzzled, because we had a way of saving queries already, but not many of you knew. I was like, oh my God, why is that? So based on this feedback, we started like to improve the experience. We started like thinking, what can we do more to make it more visible and to make sure that everyone knows about that? And that's how the new landing page, My Queries, came to life. So now you have like a way of collecting all your queries, and you can like see all of this in this mockup. You can find all your aggregation and find queries in one unified place. And this one would help you to make sure that you can always reutilize some of the aggregation that you already saved. And you can grow a catalog. So this one can just be a catalog of all your good stuff, things that you wanted to keep handy and you wanted to reuse in any other project. And by the way, like we are also like, this is just like the first step on that. And we know already that like you actually like have lots of items here. And we are already thinking how we can better organize all this new page for you. Another quote is about like, about the aggregation editor window. So it would be great if there would be an option to resize the input fields within the aggregation editor. We know that like there are some stages that are very small. So if you have a dollar limit, it's basically just one line. But there are other stages that are very complex. And so it was really difficult for you to work on the small editor window when you have such a complex stages. And that's why like for now, we just make it available like the end where you can resize the editor window so that you can really focus on the stage that you wanted to work on. And so you have more like horizontal and vertical space. Oh, I like this one. I need to know why an aggregation query takes so much time. I think I need another index, but I don't know where. Does Compass have an explained plan for aggregation query? Yes, we do now. So I think we can all agree that it's really important to understand the performance of your aggregation. Execution time and index usage are very important to optimize the pipeline. So right now, like you can see from the screen, you can see like if an index is being used, you can understand like what was the execution time, and maybe you reevaluate your query on the first place if the execution time is way too big. Another quote is about like the export to language. I hope that all of you is using this feature as well. I think it's really important. And this user was mentioning that we were only supporting 4 different languages, Java, No, C#, and Python 3, and I would love to see more languages, especially Go. And so we introduced Go, but also we extended it to Ruby and Rust as well. So now you have a nice variety of languages that you can use. And I think with the export to language feature, you can easily integrate and execute all your aggregation inside your application. Okay, this one is about the aggregation pipeline builder. So it's also one of my favorite ones. The current aggregation pipeline builder is good for authoring pipelines, but not so much for running them. The final results are limited to 20 docs and not easy to view. And viewing the intermediate stage output can slow down performance. There should be a way to execute a pipeline and page through the complete results. We totally agree on that. And so we started like to introducing the run aggregation. So we know that, especially looking at user voice and how we collect the feedback, this one was definitely one of the 5 most requested features, with many like feedback, comments, user engagement around it. You can now run the aggregation against the old collections and you can browse the results. So there is no anymore the need of, I need to copy this one, paste it in my editor to run it. So it's all integrated into Compass. And obviously, once you run it, you also want to export it. And that's also something that we introduce it. So now you can, exactly like you do in the document view, you can finally export the data. So we are finalizing the entire workflow. So after authoring the pipelines, you can run it through you can run it against the collection. You can see the results, browse through these results, and then export it. And obviously, as you can see from the mockup here, you can export via JSON or CSV. And I think this one is very useful, especially if you need to extract any insight that you wanted to share, maybe in your business. So it's very quick and efficient. So I just wanted to stop for a second to say thank you to all the team that created all these great new features, but especially to all of you that always keep the product moving. We always like to collect feedback and use them to make sure that we still have the tools that you wanted to use for every day. So we really wanted to keep counting on your feedback and keep using them. And that's why I made like a goal for myself as well about like improving the process. And I wanted just to give you a little behind the scene slide here. So this is how it works today and how we wanted to make it smoother and faster. So we're not like we are collecting always feedback from various channels. We have the user interviews. We have here with us like our researcher as well. So we talk with you. We collect feedback. We show prototypes. And then we have the feedback portal, where you can just like create new suggestions and other people will vote on them so we can understand better what's your use case and why you need something new. And then we have the NPS surveys. Maybe you've seen Max every quarter like popping out from the Compass tool, asking questions about Compass and the level of satisfaction with the tool. So all these things are really like important for us because then they help us move into the next phase. That is about like, okay, let's discuss about this. Let's have internal discussion. Let's prioritize some of the projects that we have. And then let's gather more feedback. And then once we have all this bigger understanding, we can open a ticket. And then like design and PMs and like engineers, we're all working together to make sure that we can deliver the new features to you. So I really wanted to stress this one to say that like we know that you need always something new and we are on top of that and we wanted to make this loop of feedback way faster. So now I'm linking again with Max that will show you a nice demo.
Thank you, Claudia. All right, so we talked about what we added to Compass so far and how that's the first step to making you Query API superheroes. And speaking about superheroes, that's kind of the topic of the demo today. We're going to use a data set about an online game of superhero cards where players compete against each other and whoever has the higher score wins. And so let's take a look at the data set to begin with. And we'll start with this superheroes cards collection. And the best way in Compass to look at a collection and see what the documents look like is actually to use the schema analyzer. So I'm going to analyze the schema very quickly. And we see that each of these cards for the game have obviously an ID, like any document in MongoDB. The characters on the card have an appearance, a biography, connections. Let's see what's in biography, for example. Well, this is an interesting field like alignment. We can see if the character is a good or a bad guy, or if we have neutral characters as well. And then we have connections, images, everything that makes creating an online game easy and interesting. Now, to start with, I thought we could build a hypothetical battle between good guys and bad guys, and we're going to use an aggregation for that, so good versus evil. And let me start actually with something that I had put together a few days ago. So these are my queries, the ones that, my best queries, the one that I put together and I'm planning to reuse in the future. And I'm going to start with this good versus bad. So let's look at this pipeline. It starts with a match, like every good pipeline. And then there is a match for the alignments. I don't want the alignment, so not equals to neutral. So I want only the good and the bad guys. And I sample, so I take 150 random cards from the deck. And then I do a group. And this is an interesting group because it's using an accumulator that was added in MongoDB 5.2, I believe, and will be available in 6.0, which is going to be out in GA soon. And what this does is grouping by the alignment of the characters, so bad and good, and then picking the power stats of the 10 of those characters. And the power stats are something like, for example, intelligence, strength, speed, durability, power, combat. Then in the next stage, I'm going to do a set. So I'm going to create a new field called score, where I do a reduce operation across all the power stats in the array that I showed you earlier. And then for each of the stats, I'm adding a multiplier because obviously an intelligent character is going to have an advantage over someone who just has strengths, for example. There's speed, there's durability, all with their multipliers. And then you see that I get the result for the score here. Actually, for the purpose of this exercise, I don't think we need decimal points. So let me approximate that to the next integer. And you see that autocomplete comes useful here. And then I'm going to close this here. And there you go. So now the score is an integer. And then I'm going to get rid of the power stats field because I don't need that anymore. Now that I've put together the pipeline, let's try to run it. There you go. So I run my pipeline against the entire collection. And as I keep running, the results change because of the dollar sample that you saw in the second stage of the pipeline. So sometimes the good guys win, sometimes the bad guy wins. That's what the pipeline is about. Now, we've run the pipeline. This is a pipeline on a relatively small collection. So it's going to be fast pretty much every time. But if the collection were to be bigger, then we could do more to improve its performance. And that's why in Compass we added the explain plan. So now if I explain this pipeline, we see that the explain plan tells me that no index was available for this query. And we can actually, with a bit more expertise in how the explain plan works, we can investigate a bit further and find that the winning plan had a collection scan, which is generally a bad thing in MongoDB. And so what we're going to do now is we'll try to create an index to make this aggregation a bit faster. And to do that, we can see that in the first stage, the match, we look for alignment that is not neutral. So maybe we can create an index on biography.alignment and see if that helps. So I'm going to do that now. And now if I go back to my aggregation and I run the explain plan, ideally the index is being used. And so the aggregation will run much faster now than it did earlier. Cool. So this was a nice experiment to play with. But now let's look at a use case that is more real for the online game scenario. So what does every online game have? Well, a leaderboard. So we look at how we can go through our games and figure out who are the winners and display them first in Compass, and then we'll do a bit more with that. So let's look at the games collection. Let me analyze it again. This is a bit slower because the collection has more document and the sampling takes a bit longer. So what do we have here? Well, the date of the game, obviously, the players, the rounds, because every game has 3 rounds, and we have a field for the winner of the game. Now, that field is set most of the times to an object ID, which is the ID of the user that won the game, and sometimes it's null when the game was a draw. So let's build a leaderboard pipeline on top of that. And again, I'm cheating. I built it yesterday, so I saved it here. And let me open that up so we can go through that together. So based on what we just saw in the schema analysis, we are going to filter out all the games where there was no winner. And then we group by the winner ID. And we use a sum accumulator to count how many times each player has won the game. And then we sort descending. So the top players will show up first. And then lastly, we'll limit because we do a leaderboard with just 10 games, or 10 players, sorry. Now, this is useful. This is kind of what we wanted. But the information that is contained on this stage is not particularly interesting. If I were to display that leaderboard, I would only see the ID of the user. Instead, I want to actually see the user information. And so to do that, I'm doing a lookup to the user's collection, and which we can look at very quickly. So your typical user profile and ID, first and last name, an avatar, email address, username, their country, and the date when the user was created. So we look up the user by ID, so the ID of the winner against the ID of the user collection, and then we put it here as a user. So here I have a user array with one element and the user information corresponding to the original ID. And then in the next stage, I'm doing a replace with to reformat the documents a bit and put all the information I need up at the first level. So we use a merge object that takes the first array of the first array element of the user array and then merges that with the total wins. Now I can run this aggregation, and here's my leaderboard. I can also, as you saw earlier in Claudia's part of the presentation, export the results. This is something that we see often users and customers do when they need to give the data to someone else. Maybe you want to do a marketing campaign with your top gamers. So I'm going to now do leaderboard demo, and I do export. And now this is going to run the aggregation and export the results. And so the file is now here, and I can open it, and here are my top players with their email address. So now I can go to MailChimp and do an email campaign. There's also something else I can do with this aggregation. Usually, your typical online game actually displays the leaderboard live on a website. And let's do that, actually. We use the export to language. And as an example, I'm going to use Go. And full disclaimer, I haven't done any Go in the last 10 years. So I almost don't know what I'm doing, but kind of. And yet, I can generate the Go code corresponding to this application. I can now copy it. I'm going to my code editor. I have already some boilerplate set up here. And then I'm going to paste the aggregation code here. Let me check that everything is OK. Actually, instead of using the hard-coded connection string that Compass automatically adds, I'm going to use the URI that I'm fetching here from an environment variable. And then let me see what else we need to fix. I think, oh yeah, I need a cursor to display the results. So when I do the aggregate call, I'm going to define the cursor variable here. And that's how you define stuff in Go. And now, if I have done everything properly, I can do go run main.go, and I should see the results here. There you go. So this is the leaderboard in a Go application nicely displayed on a table in my terminal. Obviously, you can do the same on a web application and get exactly the same result. That's all for the demo. So let me step back into the presentation. So let's take a look at what we saw so far. So when it comes to building an aggregation, you can obviously always start from your best aggregations. That's how we saw developers typically do things. And that's how you often do things also with your code. You start from something that you know works and change it to suit your need of a new application or a new module. And you can do the same with aggregations. You start with MyQueries, you go into the aggregation builder, and you tweak your aggregation for the new use case. Then I actually forgot to show it to you during the demo, but you can resize the stage editor when your pipeline or your stage becomes very big or the depth of your JSON becomes very wide, then you can make the stage editor bigger. And then when it comes to understanding how your aggregation is working, you can use the embedded explain plan and figure out exactly where the improvements are necessary. You can add an index, you can do other tweaks, and is available right there. And then once you've built the application, you can run it. Well, you can export it to language. You can just take your aggregation, translate it into code, your favorite programming language, move it inside the application, and run it from there. You can also run it in Compass. If you need to extract insights from the data, if you need to understand or do some data manipulation. My mic is going funny a bit. Some data manipulation, do a $out, $merge. You can do all of that within Compass. And then finally, once you have the aggregation, you run it, you can export the results and give the information to someone else. So now I'm handing it back to Claudia, who will give you a sneak peek of what we envision for the aggregation builder in the future.
Thanks. Does this one work? Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to give you a sneak peek about the future of the aggregation builder. So this is still like in the design phase, so please don't take it as real stuff that you will see soon, but I'm showing it because I really wanted to get your feedback about that, and hopefully we will have time later also. So there's a few things that we are thinking about, and first of all is like the embedded documentation. So we said at the beginning, there are so many like aggregation, like with stages, different operators, and I guess like what we learned that you always have Compass on one window and then the documentation on the other one, and then you go back and forth between the two. So, and now what we are thinking is, what if you embed the documentation directly in Compass? So you don't have any more the friction of going between the two things. And so as you can see from here, from the mockup, you can then look, for instance, at this like $lookup stage. You can read if this the stage that you wanted to use. There are a bunch of examples, and maybe you can just copy that one and put it already into your stage. The other thing that we are considering is changing a bit how the stage editor works. So right now, like the pipeline is running from top to down. And now we are thinking, but there are some limitations, right? We saw with the stage editor window, it's very small and difficult to like work with that. So what we are thinking here is, what if we reverse it? And actually the pipeline runs from left to right instead. And so you have your documents in the collection, and then you have one stage, the second stage, and then you finally have the output of it. And so like here we can definitely give much more real estate in the editor view. So it's more like a zoomed in situation where you can just focus on that one, but still have the overview of your pipeline on top, where you can see all the stages that you've been creating so far. Another thing that we thought about was like the stage wizard. We are fully aware of some of the pain points of working with MQL. There are always like some typos, curly braces missing, and so on. And so we think, how about having a wizard that can help you really easily create the stage for you. And this one is especially like important if you're new and you don't know the stage very well, then maybe you can go in this view and you can easily like set it up, and then you can see it already there for you. So it can definitely like simplify the learning process. And then the editor mode, or like, I mean, we are still not sure about how to call this one yet, but it's actually like your pipeline as text, basically. So you build your pipeline in the UI with like stage-by-stage approach, but then maybe you have a way where you can switch between a different mode view. So in here you can see all your pipeline at once. So I would imagine that you create your pipeline, and then you can go here and you can fine-tune in some of the things that maybe need some changes, maybe like just, I don't know, rename some fields and so on. So it's a nice way to like look at that all at once, and again, like run it also from here so that you can see the results as well. And obviously, like those two views will be completely in sync. So everything that you do here will be in sync with the things that you can do in the UI and vice versa. And then the aggregation variables, so that you can parameterize your aggregation the same way that you do inside the code. So I'm really looking forward to like talk with you later about like these new changes that we are thinking about. And I have a prototype with me that I can show you even more in depth how some of those interactions would work. So I think that's all in terms of the sneak peek. Thanks a lot. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation. And Max, if you wanted to come up with as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Claudia. So save the aggregations, export to language, run your aggregation, export the results, plus all the upcoming new things that you just saw in the sneak peek. What do you think? Like, is that exciting? Is that what you're looking for? So I've been using Compass with the new functionality as the team was building it, and I'll keep using it as they build the new stuff. And so far, I'm really enjoying it. I can't wait for the new functionality to become available and for me to use it in my like, day-to-day work with Compass. But now it's your turn. So you saw me do stuff during the live demo, and we prepared a little workshop for you to essentially follow the same journey. You will have a data set to work with. You can go into Compass. You can build an aggregation. You can export it to language. You can run it, obviously. And then there's a little template for a web application, but then obviously feel free to build whatever you like with the language that you prefer. And then we'll be here to help you and to talk about it and to get your feedback. But before we get into that, what questions do you have?
It's not related to what you had shown, but I was just curious if there's, it's great that you can save them. Is there a way to share those saved files?
Right, that's a good question, and you're not the first person to ask for that, obviously. I guess there are, I can think about two sides of sharing. Like one is, okay, I copy to test and I give it to someone else. We've had customers do that as a workaround for a while now. But we are actually looking at how we can integrate Compass more in depth with your Atlas profile if you are an Atlas user, so that you can sync your aggregations with your online profile and then share that with other users. I don't know if you have other options in mind. I'd be happy to chat about that as well.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So thank you for your time. And let me just go through a few bullet points for the workshop. So as I said, there will be the Superheroes dataset available for you to import through Compass. And then you will use Compass to build aggregations that you will then export and use to create a small Superheroes application. So the good versus evil battle, the game leaderboard, and then a bit more advanced that I did not show in my demo, leaderboard by country, which might require a bit of playing around with the data. Then, if you are up for trying out Atlas Search as well, we can build a Superheroes catalog with fuzzy search, and that's again an aggregation with a special $search stage. And then this is more advanced. This is about ranking the most winning cards, or like figuring out like how likely you are to win a game if you have a specific card. This, to be honest, I didn't even build this, so we can try to figure it out together. And that's it. So there's this tiny URL here where you can go to get started, and that is a web application that I built, which is also the web application that you can build. And it has a link to GitHub where you find the data, you find the getting started code, and everything that you need. Also a workbook that will help you go through the exercise with some hints as well. And obviously, we are here in the room, happy to chat about it, happy to help you out. And yeah, feel free to call us for anything that you may need. If you want to start just warming up and playing around with the data in a read-only cluster that I set up for you, then there is also the MongoDB connection string there.
Can you get through the entire exercise with just the read-only cluster?
You can. The only caveat, so you definitely can build all the aggregations on that read-only cluster, yes. If you want to build the web application, then you will have to essentially have a backend locally to fetch the data from MongoDB. Because in the template, I used functions in Atlas App Services, but I'm not married to that solution. You can use whatever backend works best for your use case or whatever language you feel comfortable with.
Nice.
Okay.
Let's get
Start up.
started.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening.